Robby, what's on your radar?
Want to hear some gossip? Lately, rumors have been flying, especially rumors concerning a notoriously secretive and imperious institution, the Supreme Court of the United States. The court has recently heard several important cases relating to the Biden administration's vaccine mandate for private sector workers and then also their mandate for healthcare workers. But members of the public who closely followed the oral arguments might have noticed that Associate Justice Sotomayor did not appear in person. She participated virtually from her chambers. Sotomayor is one of the more COVID-cautious justices owing to an underlying health condition, diabetes. She usually wears a mask and has decided to wait out the Omicron variant. That's her right, of course. The justice should do whatever is best for her own health. But according to media reports, Sotomayor was specifically concerned about appearing in person due to her colleague's failure to wear a mask. Chief Justice John Roberts went so far as to ask the other justices to wear masks, but Associate Justice Neil Gorsuch allegedly refused. NPR's legal affairs correspondent Nina Totenberg made that claim in a bombshell report earlier this week. She wrote, quote, "According to court sources, Sotomayor did not feel safe in close proximity to people who were unmasked. Chief Justice John Roberts, understanding that in some form, asked the other justice to mask up. They all did, except Gorsuch, who, as it happens, sits next to Sotomayor on the bench." His continued refusal since then has also meant that Sotomayor has not attended the justices' weekly conference in person, joining instead by telephone, end quote. So this revelation prompted widespread denunciation of Gorsuch, who has, of course, authored a book called A Republic If You Can Keep It, that laments the loss of civility in public discourse and in politics. How could a man who decries that political actors no longer treat each other with basic decency refuse to wear a mask for the immunocompromised colleague who sits next to him? Obviously, that would be hypocritical. But here's the problem. NPR's reporting is now being challenged. First, Fox News' Shannon Bream did some digging of her own, and her SCOTUS sources said the report was untrue. Gorsuch did not refuse a request to mask up. Dueling news stories, one from the progressive mainstream, another from right-leaning media, they're hard to adjudicate. But the Supreme Court made it easier for us. Yesterday, Gorsuch and Sotomayor released a joint statement putting the rumor to bed. Reporting that Justice Sotomayor asked Justice Gorsuch to wear a mask surprised us. It is false. While we may sometimes disagree about the law, we are warm colleagues and friends. Did that dispel the story? Not quite. Progressive activist Charlotte Clymer called it a dodge because technically NPR had reported that Roberts, acting on behalf of Sotomayor, asked Gorsuch to mask up, not Sotomayor. So I guess we'll never know for sure. But wait! The Chief Justice released a statement as well. In it, he unequivocally states that he did not ask Gorsuch to wear a mask. So I think a rational person should consider this case closed. Look, if you really want to believe that Roberts, Gorsuch, and Sotomayor herself are all lying about this, fine, go right ahead. But when all sides of an alleged dispute deny that it took place, and they are generally reputable people, and all we have to the contrary is anonymous sourcing, it's pretty clear how we should generally feel about it. Now, to some extent, the damage was already done. However, that NPR story was repeated far and wide by Newsweek, by the Daily Beast, by MSNBC, CNN, Politico, USA Today, Business Insider, and on and on and on. The New York Times' Janelle Bowie smeared Gorsuch as, quote, an impossibly callous guy with poisonous levels of self-regard. And that was one of the more polite descriptions. If you want to read others, check out this thread by the conservative writer Drew Holden, who as always has the receipts. Now, I have to wonder how many people will have seen the initial story but missed the important clarifying information. And I have to wonder how many others will lose faith in the media over a botched story like this, or have already lost faith due to the sheer frequency with which poorly and anonymously sourced stories are pushed by the media and then fall apart days later, as they did in this case. So, you know, this was a couple-day story, and then you have this NPR report, and you have statements from everyone denying that it happened. And I saw a lot of trying to, hand-wringing in the media, trying to be like, well, it doesn't exactly contradict it if you look at it this way. Well, okay, then another statement comes out. It's pretty dead, but it was, far and wide. It was repeated on all the cable channels.
I have a couple media criticism points on this one to make. So one would be sometimes the on-record statements of authorities are true. Sometimes they are false. But sometimes it's the anonymous sources that are correct and the on-record authorities that are lying. One of the examples that has stuck with me through my career is, so in 2009, I reported that the Big Pharma and the White House had struck a deal. And the deal was pharma would support Obamacare, and the White House would give all of these concessions. And I had the concessions down to the decimal point of the different giveaways that the White House was giving them, and I had them listed out in a little email. I got a on-record denial from the pharmaceutical industry through pharma. I got an on-record denial that's just simply false from the White House, and I ran the story anyway. And it turned out to be true. Because when the bill came out, the things that I had reported down to the decimal point were in there. When Republicans took over in 2011, they then launched investigations into everything that Obama had ever done. One of the things they did was get emails related to this, and they got emails that showed pharma and the White House going back and forth with my media request saying, wait, and it's almost verbatim, it was like, hey, wait, you've denied this on the record. We've denied this on the record. And they're still claiming they're going to publish this? How does that work? And the pharmaceutical guy, lobbyist, said, well, it's the Huffington Post. They don't follow the same rules that the rest of Washington does. In other words, the rest of Washington, you give them 2 on-record denials, they're like, okay, never mind. All we have is anonymous sources. Whereas we were like, no, you know what? This is true. Now, silo that over here. The second point would be, I think what this shows here is the problem that media is going to increasingly have as their sources become one-sided. You need sources. If you're a progressive reporter, if you're a reporter for NPR, you need good sources in the Gorsuch camp and in the Roberts camp. Nina Totenberg probably has very good sources in the Sotomayor camp. Sotomayor herself. And if you read the original Nina Totenberg story, it says Sotomayor understood that Roberts had in some form asked the other justices to mask up. So what you can deduce from that is Sotomayor was told by Roberts. She was like, hey, I want people to mask up. And Roberts was like, I'll take care of it. Right? You can imagine, I got you, don't worry. And then he maybe doesn't do anything. He's just being nice to his colleague. And maybe he at the water cooler was like, Neil, kind of be cool, wouldn't it, if we all wore masks up on the bench? And Neil's like, kind of would be. Then he doesn't do it. And then in Robert's mind, he's like, all right, I've done my duty, that I told Sonia that I would do this. But you can imagine that Sotomayor told this to Nina Totenberg. And then Nina Totenberg then not having the needed sources in the Gorsuch and the Roberts camp goes with a one-sided version, which is true to Sotomayor, because Sotomayor probably felt like she was told that this was a frustration for her and that Roberts was going to deal with it. And that's why that weird language of felt like, that Roberts said in some form that he would tell the other, and that Sotomayor understood that. And so you're going to get reporting that's off because it's only coming from one side. That's my speculation on it anyway.
And that could be correct. You think Sotomayor was Totenberg's source?
Or people close to Sotomayor.
Yeah, but people closer is a little different.
I think it could be Sotomayor, though.
I think it could be, but
Jeffrey Toobin and Nina Totenberg are among the only people who have direct access, maybe one or two others. But those are the people who historically have direct access.
I think increasingly there is a lot of grudge carrying out being done through the media by people in the White House, in other branches of government, not the person, but the person under the person who's like, how do I get even with someone on the other side? You say something, and then it never gets back. You're never held responsible because it's anonymous sourcing. We become far too reliant on anonymous sourcing. This used to be something that media, even progressive media commentators would complain about back in the Obama days, that there's just way too much, because everyone will badmouth people that they're mad at, over drinks later if they're not going to be held accountable for it, and we've taken it to I think
that kind of anonymous sourcing I think is different.
Yeah,
where you're letting somebody have an anonymity just to badmouth their political opponent.
Yeah,
and anonymity.
I think it falls somewhere in between those two things.
I think it does too. I think it's pretty close to that actually.
Yeah,
and that's why I think you needed better sourcing on the other side of this.
Yeah. All right. Well, good discussion. Thanks for your perspective, and we'll have Team Rising joining us up next.